Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martin Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Wātea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. And once you see politics through that lens, the left can never lose another election ever again. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martin Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are former New Zealand First National MP Henare, Green Party MP Steve Abel, and New Zealand Herald columnist Simon Wilson. We were going to have Helen Clark on this evening. Unfortunately, she hasn't been able to get through customs quickly enough, and we won't be able to have her on the show. We hope to see her next year. Shout outs to Kiwi Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. Your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout out to our Wātea Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Sky TV whānau. Our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, this week, David Seymour, Chris Bishop and Tama Potaka gathered on Parliament's lawns with dogs to celebrate new legislation that allows pet bonds for landlords. Yay! We get to pay landlords more money. What is the point of pet bonds when you can't afford the rent? Every renter knows you just sneak in a pet and make sure you hide the food bowl when they inspect. Thanks to National Enact, there's now a way for you to pay for that. Those landlords need more money. Let's be very clear and very honest. This whole farce is just so Bish, Seymour and Tama can stand next to a dog, take a photo and look slightly less sociopathic than they usually do. Let's see how many funny comments we can make with this picture. Man's worst friend? Who let the dogs out? Why is David's dog large enough to saddle and ride? What's he overcompensating for? Government's controversial new homelessness policy and Bishop's leadership coup numbers included pets. Talking of going to the dogs, news this week that one of David Seymour's school slops turned up mouldy and liquefied has prompted an odd defence from David. Firstly, how many Michelin stars would that school lunch get? This is just the latest example of how David Seymour has managed to take a wonderful school lunch policy and underfund it so badly that those needing it learn to hate it. When those failures keep getting reported to the Prime Minister, he simply tells parents to make Marmite sandwiches, which is surprising because I didn't realise how large the mocking hungry children electorate was. David Seymour has responded by attacking the principal for complaining to the media and notes that only 10 students have been ill and argues their illness could have been caused by anything other than his mouldy school lunch, which doesn't feel like much of a response. His defence boils down to, this stupid principal keeps complaining about my shitty food. Only 10 kids got sick. You don't even know if my mouldy food made them sick. David Seymour is better at twerking than feeding our kids, and he's not very good at twerking. And finally, in this week's War on News, confusion reigns over what American President Donald Trump is doing off Venezuela's coast after his latest extrajudicial assassination of boats cruising around went from questionable legality to outright war crime as his enormous fleet double-tapped a suspected drug boat, killing those with a second strike after the first strike immobilized them. Even in war, there are rules, and while it's not clear he has any authority to be doing what he's doing, even the military frowns upon purposely killing people who've already been neutralized. What confuses his highly questionable war on drugs even more is Trump personally pardoning Honduras' ex-president for cocaine trafficking. He's blowing up boats and killing people with no clear legal jurisdiction for drug dealing while he pardons an actual drug dealer. This feels less like a war on drugs and more like a war on basic reasoning. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is joining us from Wellington. He's a Green Party MP from the House of Gryffindor. He and I once put a pirate radio antenna on top of Marsden A power station up north and broadcast interviews with politicians demanding they shut it down, which they did. He's the spokesperson for agriculture, animal welfare, food safety, just transitions, Māori Crown relations, racing, resources and Treaty of Waitangi negotiations. Green Party list MP Steve Abel. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir. Oh, is he muted? Is he on mute? You might be on mute. There we go. Go for it. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
I'd say chaos.
Chaos. Our next panellist is a former New Zealand First Minister and National Party MP. He's been paying for those sins ever since. He's the reformed Darth Vader from West Auckland. Tau Henare. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Brother.
One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Interesting.
Interesting. And last but certainly not least, he is the only reason you would buy a subscription to the New Zealand Herald. He's a cross between House of Hufflepuff and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Militant cyclist and Auckland visionary New Zealand Herald columnist Simon Wilson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please.
I'm going to say super majority, and I'm going to explain it because I am a joy germ at Christmas time. I have spent 3 Saturdays in the last month sitting in on a process on the North Shore of Auckland, of all places, where they were exercising what's called deliberative democracy.
Does it work?
It did work. They got 40 people representative of the demographics of the North Shore suburbs and put to them the question of what should happen to the wildly contentious land that the council owns that the Takapuna Golf Club is using at the moment.
Yes.
And after the council's built a wetland, what should happen to the rest? These people came from all sorts of different walks of life. They did not look like the normal crowd who turn up to public meetings to complain about things. Fascinating just in itself.
Sure.
A really good demographic spread. They spent 3 whole days working hard on this question, and they came out with a series of recommendations that all had super majorities. In other words, 80% of them had to agree.
Wow.
They went into that not agreeing at all, and they came out with a series of 80% recommendations simply by agreeing at the outset to talk seriously, to get themselves well informed, and they were, to not allow anyone to tell them what to think. That got all shut down if anything like that happened, and to treat each other with courtesy and respect. And they came through and got that outcome. It's an amazing thing. You could do that to what do we do about EDs in hospitals? You could do that with what do you do on Queen Street in Auckland. You could do that with what do you do about density in Auckland as well. There's a whole range of issues.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you ask citizens, okay, we've all got different perspectives, we're all coming to it from different values, we've got different economic classes here. But when you ask people, how would you do something? How would you get this event? Because they've got to go beyond their own petty sort of bigotries and the easy stuff, right? And actually go, well, how are we going to do this and make it fair for everyone? It changes the decision making, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And, you know, over this whole process, there were really great exercises. Everybody gets up and stands in a line from I love golf to I don't want anything to do with golf on that side ever again. Where do you stand in the middle? And then people start talking about that and shuffle their positions around a bit, because what they're also doing is they're recognising I'm capable of changing my mind, and I'm going to do it for good reasons, not for silly reasons, but I'm capable of doing it. And, you know, that leads to other things. Just fascinating.
Amen. Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, Labour's conference and the watering down of expectations. Issue 2, are local council rate caps and regional council changes a power grab? And issue 3, UN investigates treatment of Māori under this government. Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist get to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on toe. Comrades, let's get into tonight's show with issue 1. Labour's conference over the weekend was a beige on beige charm attack of mediocrity with policy wonk wonk for wonk wonks. The wonk was so dull, I kept falling asleep during it. Let me try and explain it to you without nodding off. The government will provide low-interest loans to GP. Oh, sorry. It's so dull. I'm falling asleep just thinking about it. Shit, it's boring. Simon, beige on beige incrementalism is all Labor needs to offer those who voted Labor in 2020 and then voted National in 2023. This is boring wonk, but Labor needs to be boring to win the centre, right?
Yeah, I'm all in favour of it, and I'm not saying that means I'll vote for it, but I'm all in favour of having a Labor Party that says we are going to do what it takes to get elected, and if that what it takes doesn't mean stupid populism like the National Party, but does mean we're going to have moderate versions of policies that if they were bigger and bolder would be more effective. Well, okay, if the moderate versions get them elected, we've got this guy, Steve Abel, and his party to vote for if you don't like that. We've got Te Pāti Māori to vote for if you don't like that.
Yes.
If you want to vote for a more radical version of things, that's absolutely the option that is there. But Labor, if there's going to be a change of government, Labor will lead the next government if there is that change.
Right.
And if they don't get elected, we will all suffer for that.
I'm not looking for the socialist utopia from this Labor Party, right? That's not their jam. That's not what they're going to do. But Chippy's a decent human being, right? Who has real values. I don't think for 1 second he would give $300 million to the big tobacco. I don't think he would have given $200 million to oil and gas, right? It's a value judgment thing. And surely he's a better person in there than this current group, right?
I think you're right that I would rather have a Labor-led government than a national-led government. I think that's very clear. I'm not going to go overboard on that. Chippy's a decent person who, he went into politics to make a difference in education and became the Minister of Education. And I'm sorry, I forget what he did.
He forgot what he did.
I think so. He spent his life working towards that, and it didn't really achieve very much at all. He is a very smart politician. He is more articulate, more in charge of the information in his head, more able to get it out, and more able to understand what should be said when than any of his colleagues by some distance.
Yeah.
And that's why he's the unchallenged leader of his party.
Right.
He's not going to change the world. He needs to be pushed to do that, and that's the job of other people in the party and whatever party's going to coalition with him.
Follow-up question. What they should have done to announce this wonk alongside an actually bold program like free nursing and doctor education for 5 years bonding to a specific region, plus dental. 2 years inside New Zealand after that. But that would have required a desire to rock the boat, and Labor have zero intention of doing that when they're so close to winning without having to promise a hell of a lot, right?
I think one of the problems for Labor is that they have inherited a legacy from the 2020 to 2023 government where in some ways they were very radical and left everybody behind.
Yes.
In other ways they were not nearly radical enough and people went beyond them.
Yeah.
And at the same time they were burnt out from the COVID experience.
Totally.
Didn't seem to be even able to think straight.
Yeah.
Now, though that combination made it a glorified mess. They've got to find a way to build back from that. That does mean that there's a lesson to learn from the current government, which is a lesson they learnt from Roger Douglas and David Lange way back in 1984. Go hard and go fast. Absolutely, the Blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
Do it with good policies.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Steve, Labor haven't followed Zohan Mamdani's policy. They've followed sellout Keir Starmer's Labor UK policy. Doesn't this incrementalism highlight how difficult it would be for the Greens to get anything meaningfully transformative out of Labor if you guys win next year?
Social Democrats are the problem.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's true. Like, Labor have promised to tinker.
Yeah.
And when I think of the governments in New Zealand's history that I'm most proud of, is the Michael Joseph Savage government, is the Norm Kirk government to a lesser extent, and despite the Dawn raids, no good. But Labor has lost its way since the last radical transformational government that this country saw, which was the Roger Douglas one of the 80s.
Yes.
They have not got out from under the mantle of neoliberalism. I saw a great Bodie cartoon this week of a big truck that said economic orthodoxy, and behind it was Christopher Hipkins in a little red car. To his right was a bank of traffic, and to his left was a free lane with a sign saying, "No passing on the left."
Yeah.
And that says it all.
Yeah.
This Labour, Hipkins-led government will not bring transformational change to this country. It will not challenge the neoliberal orthodoxy. I disagree with Simon on this. It's not simply a problem of, well, you can vote Green instead. Clearly, we are here to challenge it, and we're here for the Mamdani vision. But we really need Labour to get their shit correct on this, because otherwise it's just a flip-flop between those legacy parties, National and Labour, and nothing really changes. The economic dial for the massive inequality problems we have in this country. And we need Labour to, get a bit more brave and get a more bold and actually look long and hard at those pictures of Michael Joseph Savage they've got hanging on their wall and think about what that really means.
Follow-up question. Both Labour and National have committed to keeping the size of government and government debt at below or just over 30% of GDP. Both have believed private investment could substitute for the public investment, creating public-private partnerships. Isn't Labour just slightly less, a slightly less cruel neoliberal version of National?
Yep, that's what they are. And listen, we're going to work with Labour. We got nowhere else to go. We're not going to work with National. Because the new next government needs to be repealing a bunch of the rubbish this government's done, and taking the country a step in the right direction. What I think is really sad about how Hipkins is pitching it, in theory, it's playing safe. It's been the banal pink version of a red party, and there's probably too many connotations in that analogy. I didn't mean those. But what I mean is that I actually think they've misread the room on this. People were frustrated with Labour in the 2020 government, in many ways unfairly. They did deal with a massive crisis in the COVID thing.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of necessarily bold things around
Yes.
that. But they were frustrated that the big transformations didn't happen.
We were still waiting for that promise, weren't we?
In economics. And I think they've misread the room. You can actually come out with meaningful transformational change positions and move the public discourse. And if Labour's not doing it and you leave it to the Greens, and we're going to take that mantle, don't you worry. We'll be fighting hard for meaningful change. But if Labour doesn't do it, it gets a lot harder in the electoral space. And I'll give you one example.
Please.
Labour's capital gains tax will raise $700 million per year. So over the course of 4 years, they will raise $2.8 billion. 2 7 to 14, 2 8 to 28. Yeah, $2.8 billion. That lunch and schools program alone costs $350 million.
Yep.
So they're going to have an extra $2.8 billion to spend than the current budget. Our wealth tax, the Greens' wealth tax, that will be paid by fewer than 1% of the population.
Yes.
Will raise $72 billion in 4 years. So you can have $2.4 billion or $72 billion. And that's including actually our progressive tax plan, which means 91% of New Zealanders will pay less tax than they currently are.
Right.
Because it's properly progressive.
Yes.
We are going to be taxing wealth, not work.
Yes.
That's the difference between whether Labour and Greens are standing on economic transformation.
2.8 billion versus
2.8 or $72.4 billion.
And this is the problem, isn't it? The Labour Party talk a good game about funding our public services properly, but I'm not seeing the revenue structure to be able to do that, right?
That's right. There's no revenue structure. So how are you actually going to fix health? How are we actually going to fix the infrastructure challenges we have? I know the next subject's going to be the local council, the regional council stuff. Looking forward to talking about that. But you got to get serious about recognising what this government has is a fiscal deficit because they're not prepared to tax enough.
That's right.
And then onto your other point, which is about our willingness to have a greater percentage of our GDP in debt. We have a far lower GDP
than almost every other OECD country, right?
Yeah. It's about 42%. Yes. And if we moved it to 50%, which the Greens support, we would raise significantly more money. It's safe money. And if the state doesn't pay for it, the citizen pays for it. So if the state's not paying for your dental care, your health care, your education, then you are paying for it.
I think it's time we started looking at sovereign credit, quite frankly. Mikey Savage built the entire nation on it. After sacrificing for the entire country so the COVID vaccination rates could get high enough, Aucklanders looked at what Labour was offering in the form of GST off fruit and vegetables in 2020 and felt Labour had slapped us in the face for our lockdown sacrifice. Is a wonk on GP loan funding just enough above GST off fruit and vegetables for Labour to get away with another year of incremental dullness?
Yeah, when he came out with the policy of offering cheap loans to doctors and that, I mean, I thought, why don't you go backwards to go forwards? And what I mean is, how about offering the first home buyer, or people, the first home buyer, how about offering them interest-free loans and a loan that is backed by the state, and they could call
Where'd you get that idea?
And they could call it state advances.
Right.
Guess how my old man and old lady got into a house.
Exactly.
Okay, it only was $7,000 in those days, but it let them on the ladder. It got them on the ladder. Not that they went and sold it. Shit, I mean, it was still there in my mid-20s.
Sure.
And we still had it.
Yeah.
My grandmother and my grandfather still had their house, and they'd been dead for 10 years at least. So, I mean, when are we going to get a leader? And this is not against the professions that I'm about to name. When are we going to get a leader who's not a teacher, who's not a university graduate? When are we going to get a fucking Norman Kirk, who was a railwayman or a boilerman or somebody like that? I mean, I was a kid when Kirk died. My old man was a Tory, but when he died, he gave that event the gravitas that it deserved.
Respect.
Because all Kirk wanted was a shelter over everybody's head, some food on the table,
and someone to love.
And somebody to love.
Right.
And we, I mean, I hear what Steve is saying, but here's the thing about why Labour are a bit full of inertia, is that they know that they are the only other party that can win. They're the only other party. The Greens, bless their soul, can't win an election on their own. Māori Party, whichever fucking version you're thinking of today, and what's today? Tuesday.
It could be anything. It could be anything.
It could
right
be
now.
anything.
Could
so
be anything.
so they are playing a safe game. But ask the homeless fella down in Queen Street, do you want a safe game, or do you want a house, or do you want some help? Because half of the fellas down on Queen Street have got mental health issues.
Yes.
You know?
Follow-up question. Are wounded and dazed voters looking for a Prime Minister or an emotional support Labrador? Because Chippy can do both things. Chippy can be both things.
He can do whatever he wants as long as he doesn't scare the horses.
Yeah.
You know? You can't go into an election thinking, I'll just stay where I am. Honestly, you either go for it or you don't.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be different with Barbara Edmonds. I think it would be different with a few other people. But I still think, where's the working class hero?
Yeah.
that so many of people of my age, and most probably young people out there, they want a working class hero, but we ain't got it.
Yeah.
Willie's not a working class. There's no working class left in the Labour Party.
It was the reality. Quick round. New Zealand First continues to be the jester in the pack. Can Labour really cut a deal with Winston? Steve, can Labour cut a deal with Winston? Oh, we're off. Mike, moot. There we go.
Sorry,
That's
I'm
okay.
sparing you my grunts and groans. Not if you believe the cohesion of our nation promised in our founding agreement, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, is the true foundation of what makes our nationhood. You can't work with Winston on that because Peters is hell-bent on that populist division sown by being anti-treaty. And
totally
doing this
right.
deal with the devil with this government and being anti-Māori in the same time.
Simon.
I think that's right, Steve, and I think there's another issue too. New Zealand First has moved itself into a position now where they are so profoundly anti-climate action that for any party that understands we do face a real global crisis that New Zealand has a responsibility to play its part in for our own people, for the Pacific, for the world. How you put New Zealand First into the same government as yourself, if you think that, I don't know how you do that.
So Penny got into trouble talking to Winston, and everyone's saying there's something going on there. Can Labour really cut a deal with Winston?
I remember being a part of a Tory party that stood up to people like Winston and Key. Bless his soul. I know people hate his guts.
But he wouldn't have put up with this, eh?
But he said to Winston, "Nah, not this time."
Yeah.
And I actually think that if Chippy got up on a podium and said, "We're not dealing with Winston.
Right.
We are not dealing with New Zealand First in any form of the next government. It's us, it's the Greens, and it's the Māori Party."
Whatever that looks like.
Whatever that means or looks like, that's what you get in a three-way coalition.
Yeah.
And I think people will rally around Chippy, but Chippy's scared.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want to.
I think there's another element to that Steve and I were disagreeing before about how radical Labour ought to be. If the Labour position is we're going to be moderate so we can get the moderate centrist votes, and as I said before, I don't criticise them for that, but if that's their position, they have to acknowledge that people who want more radical reform
are going to go to the Greens.
Yeah, and they've got to therefore commit to working with them.
Yes. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is the decision to replace regional councils and cap rates. Are these sensible suggestions to help local democracy, or the largest power grab since the signing of the treaty? Steve, so option 1 of the new councils is an urban vote, a town vote, and 3 rural votes, with the deciding process being a majority vote out of 5. Option 2 is a demographically weighted vote that gives urban 70%, town 15%, and 3 rural votes 5% each. Option 1 sets up the rural sector to have all dominance. Option 2 weights it to the urban areas. Which voting option will the rural-friendly National Party ensure passes?
The funny thing about regional councils is that they were set up by the neoliberals to make sure it's kind of an effort in gerrymandering, so that in the likes of Canterbury, the urban vote wasn't going to be able to win the day against the rural vote.
Yes, and that's right.
It's interesting that they're calling for getting rid of those regional councils, but no, they will seek to have an electoral structure that doesn't see an actual democratic representation, and to maintain the power of that rural farmer vote, if you like.
And we've seen them gerrymandering the special votes going into the election. So National have no problem doing this sort of thing, right?
No qualms at all. And and you know the key national government was the one that kicked the Canterbury Regional Council out because they didn't like what they were doing around fresh water.
Yeah.
But Labor didn't give it back. So please.
Yeah, fair point. And to be fair, like I sort of agree with your points, Toe, on Key. You know, we'd probably all be happy to have Key right now.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Well, not me actually, because he didn't give me a job.
Gee, Steve now who's aiming low.
If you're going to have a right-wing government, but
I know. Yeah.
The other thing is that, of course, this government is the one that said we're not going to deal with the major infrastructure challenge that regional councils have, which is around the water infrastructure.
Right.
We're going to get rid of Three Waters, which was an attempt for central government to say, we recognise there is not the capital in the regions to pay for the infrastructure deficit we have in that space, so let's work out how to do it through central government. This government chucks all that out, puts the burden back on local councils to pay for that necessary infrastructure development. They start looking at how to do it, have to put the rates up to pay for it, and now they turn around saying, oh, you can't put the rates up. It's just a lockdown on recognition of what investment needs to be made in this country to make it function so that people have safe drinking water. You know, there's boil water notices all over the country. Environment Canterbury's declared a nitrate emergency. It's nitrate and E. coli because the drinking water is not safe to drink. And who would have thought in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where we have water, you know, an abundance of water, that people can't trust that the water coming out of the kitchen tap is safe to drink? That is absolutely unacceptable.
Follow-up question: by implementing a rates cap, won't this lead to a fire sale of local infrastructure that councils can't afford any longer?
Yep. And I think that's the agenda, isn't it?
Right. So rather than a rates cap, why not have the government pay rates on Crown land, rebate GST on rates and construction materials used in a council area, and rebate GST from tourism spending to council areas? Yeah. I mean, if it's about money, there are solutions, right?
Yeah. A yes to everything. Okay? There's the simple answer. That shit ain't happening. I've been on for years just on dockland. Dock do not pay rates.
Yeah.
It would be huge if they could or would pay rates. But here's the thing, and there's nothing wrong with a main freight Auckland Public Library. Look, the rates cap is in my version of the world so anti-democratic. So anti-democratic.
Yeah.
If a city is to do its job properly, it has to have all the levers at its disposal.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
You cannot hamstring an organisation with silly laws. And I don't personally believe that it is the next step to privatising of our assets. Let's say tamaki assets. But what I do think is it's real short-sighted, and it's about this government. This government is fucking useless. Honestly, I have seen other national parties come and go, and there's nothing in what has happened in the last 2 years that any one of them, apart from Mouldy, that would have taken this on.
Right.
It has been a weekly hit on Indigenous people in this country. Every week,
right,
we get blamed for kids not doing well because there's a treaty. You know, if we were in America and they had the treaty, that's their constitution.
Yeah,
that's how this country grew up.
Yeah,
there's a book out. It's called Garrison something, and it's about all the troops and when they came to New Zealand. And mate, this was a fascist state. It was taken by soldiers. Upwards of 20,000 troops here at the same time that, in fact, one of the fellas up from in town, Colonel Ayres, was unleashing on Jamaica.
Right.
That, you know the song 96 Degrees in the Shade?
Yep.
That's him.
Wow.
From here. And he was used here to suppress Māori. So what I'm basically saying is, look, it's anti-democratic. and this government is to blame. And here's the thing about this government. On Tuesday, they vote for the Regulatory Standards Bill. By Friday, or actually 2 days later, by Thursday, the former Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs says that we're going to go and campaign against it. Right. Fuck, I nearly fell off my chair, honestly. But the worst one was our Minister of Finance the day later saying, yeah, well, we might consider that too. If you were considering how useless that piece of legislation was,
why did you vote for it?
How did you vote for it? And you should be punished. So both Winston and National should be punished for their absolute balls up of a government that we know overseas we have a reputation that is in the mud.
Yeah.
Because we didn't follow what we usually do.
Yeah.
The clear one was Palestine.
Oh,
you know?
unbelievable.
Why couldn't we said yes on that?
Right.
Two-state solution,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. We know it's going to be hard, but we will back Palestine.
Yeah.
And what do we do?
Yeah, we backed the war criminals.
That's right,
We supported the war criminals. Follow-up question. Is a rates cap a political stunt from a Prime Minister in desperate search of a polling bump? I mean, they're not going to really do it, are they?
Not really, because this sort of shit doesn't get the lumpen proletariat working.
Yep.
You know, it just doesn't grab anybody.
Yeah.
It's a whatever.
Simon, isn't there an irony here that the only reason rates are going up is because of government pushing costs onto local council? The government's replacement for Three Waters is going to cost $48 billion. Why aren't voters angry at the government for pushing extra rates costs onto their local council rather than blaming their local council?
I think the simple answer to that is the government keeps blaming councils for that.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to look at council and go, surely they do waste money, because my rates bill is the largest bill that I have to pay every time I pay bills.
Yeah.
And that isn't true about your tax, because it just comes out as PAYE and you don't sit down and physically pay it in that way. So there's a perception about rates not delivering.
And Wellington Council isn't helping, is it? There was that terrible, and today that report that they're not even sure of tens of millions of dollars of contracts.
Yeah, and the thing about government is that you can always look at any kind of government anywhere and go, that could probably be done a bit more efficiently, and let's work at doing that. That isn't an argument at all against the whole institution, but that's what we've got here.
Yeah.
Just want to say, the book Toll was talking about Garrison something is Garrison World by Charlotte MacDonald.
That's the one.
I know this because I went to school with Charlotte.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Fabulous book. Fabulous book. Yeah,
I got to get it.
Yeah. If you look at Auckland, with the rates, Auckland is going to have a 7.9% average residential rates rise next financial year. That has been re-announced because Wayne Brown's just announced his draft budget, but that was in the 10-year plan, so we already knew that. And the main reason it's gone higher than previous years that Wayne Brown was in charge, or anyone was in charge, is because of the CRL, which is going to involve more running costs and more administrative costs to get it set up and getting it working properly. And that is a function of the CRL being the only piece of railway in the country that is not fully paid for by the government.
Wow.
There you go. So that's a part of it. But if you look at what Wayne Brown has said, and Phil Goff before him and Len Brown before him, you keep raising your rates in a moderate way in order to develop services, you can stay on top of things. If you cut your rates below what is sustainable, then you will. The first thing you'll do is defer maintenance. The next thing you'll do is lay off the staff who do the work. And the next thing after that is that you will say, we just can't afford to run this service, so we're going to have to sell it.
Yeah.
So that is the agenda there. I think Steve was absolutely right about that. And the thing about infrastructure in particular is that infrastructure costs have risen in the last several years, way above the general rate of inflation. Particularly in transport and water, all those things. Local governments have a lot to do to keep up. And the more they don't keep up, the more trouble they put their citizens in. You mentioned Wellington before. Wellington is the basket case example of that. Nobody anywhere wants water gushing up out of the streets because the pipes are so broken because nobody ever fixed them.
Follow-up question. The rates cap has been a taxpayers' union talking point for 2 years because a strangled local democracy process that can't maintain assets has less chance of fighting development. How is this not a power grab by the right?
Oh, it absolutely is. I'm not sure, was it you, Toh, who said that this won't actually happen in the end? Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Maybe Wayne Brown really will go to war with the government next year, because it's election year.
Yep.
He keeps promising to.
Sure.
This might be an issue he does it on.
Yeah.
But it is an attempted power grab by the right. That's absolutely true. And it is populist nonsense. That's all it is. It's not based on anything more than this is a way we stay in power by frightening you with the idea that we're the only ones who can look after your money properly.
Yeah.
Demonstrably untrue.
Demonstrably.
But that's all they got.
Finally tonight, the United Nations Committee on Eliminating Racial Discrimination has heard a complaint from Māoridom that this government has escalated discrimination against Māori. Amazingly, very few mainstream media are even bothering to carry this story. Toh, the list of things this government has done to counter Māori interests and aspirations is intense, yet barely any mainstream media are covering the story. In your opinion, has New Zealand gone backwards on race relations, and how bad is it?
Well, like I said, I mean, our reputation around the world was about not how cool we all are, but how we see the pathway forward, how we work together.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. I could be as radical as I want and say all of you into the sea.
Yes, you
but
could.
But that's not going to get anywhere. It doesn't do anything for people. It doesn't build people up. You know, I mean, it beggars belief about what this government, and I say government because there's National Act and New Zealand First. They have done to New Zealand's reputation what I don't know, shit. Honestly, it's actually shameful to walk around the world telling people that you're actually from New Zealand. Now, you know, before it was quite a cool thing to do. You know, Jacinda actually, and I know that there's people think that she's a murderer and blah 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 blah, but I thank Jacinda. For being as cool as she was.
Yes.
You know, she was Mrs. Cool.
Yeah.
And we had our cross swords and banter in the house. But boy, she deserves her place in New Zealand's history. Yeah. She saved thousands of people. She saved my family.
Yeah.
And thank you very
health first.
And thank you very much.
Yeah.
Look, no, I don't think anybody could have done it any better, to be honest.
Sure.
But the thing is that the UN report is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything. We already know this. Whoop-de-doo. Well done to Lady Tude Moxon.
Absolutely.
For having the cojones to sort of take that all the way to the UN and for the UN to accept it.
Yeah.
And let's have a look.
Yeah.
Because that's a shameful thing as well as the United Nations having a look at you when you used to be number one, but now you're number 55.
Isn't there a fundamental problem for the right if they continue to use Māori as a political punching bag? When you look at the demographics, just the demographics, right? 70% of Māori are under the age of 40. That is an enormous demographic bubble. The future is younger and browner. Yeah. And if ACT and New Zealand First and National continue to denigrate Māori culture, continue to push this anti-treaty, anti-Māori agenda, there's a danger, isn't there, for them politically?
There's a couple of things in there. One is because of our young population and because of Pākehā's older population.
Right.
Guess who's not wiping your ass when you're 85 years old?
Yeah.
Not me, says the brother from Waiatarua, from wherever. Yeah. That's that one. The second one is, and I think you see it in Hobson's pledge, they got this shit about the Māori seats. This is a question that came up in my time in the National Party caucus.
Yep.
And again, bless his soul, John Key. It was about Māori seats. It was about, should we get rid of them? Should we keep them? He said, not going anywhere near this thing.
Yeah.
You want civil disobedience in the street?
Yeah.
You want a war?
Yeah.
That's your.
That's what leadership
that's your
looks like.
Entry point.
Yeah, that's what leadership
Today,
looks like.
the answer is, yeah.
Yeah, I
maybe.
know. They'd consider it. They're seriously considered. Simon,
Yeah.
the de-establishment of the Māori Health Authority, changes to legislation regarding Māori children in care, efforts to limit the use of te reo Māori, and support for a bill on the principles of Treaty of Waitangi. We deserve the UN scrutiny, don't we?
No, we totally do. And I think it's relatively mild. You can... I mean, the report in state care into children in state care is the kind of benchmark, really.
Yeah.
That was the point at which the whole country, from the Prime Minister on down, said, right, that's been wrong. We've been doing that wrong. That is not acceptable. That is not who we
200,000 kids abused. 200,000.
Yes, that is not who we think we are, and it has to stop. Now, everybody said that. Everybody said that. We now know that it has continued. Since then, since the report, it's continuing.
Right.
There is no systematic attempt to stop it. There is no reckoning. There is no understanding that if you are going to complain about gangs, you can't seriously not take account of what happens when people are put into state care in the way that, or religious care in the way that
80% of Black Power and mongrel mob members abused and state care. 80%. If you want less gang members, don't abuse them as kids. Huh?
So you might think that even at the simple level of we're just going to take race out of it and we're going to talk about it on a needs basis, to quote everybody's friend David Seymour.
Yeah.
You might think that might lead people to do something about it anyway. But no. But no.
Right.
Because actually it is regarded as a Māori issue so that it can be ignored. That is what it is.
And it's the same with this move on order.
Oh.
Yeah.
And where do you move them on to?
Right?
Greyland?
Newmarket.
Newmarket?
Ponsonby?
But how is it that there's all this money, and I don't mean to pick on older people because I'm an older person now myself. How do you square the rise in retirement villages, really lovely, and old people pay for it, but they're shit for the homeless people.
Yeah.
And half of them got mental health issues.
Yeah.
And he, the bald-headed fella from Botany, wants to have a law that says that the council can move them on because somebody in a boat who has come to visit might piss themselves because of somebody's... You know, when I went to the UK for the first time, that was the first time
Homeless people, right?
ever seen sleeping in the doorway. I said, oh, fuck, that's freaky.
Yeah.
I come back here, and
it's everywhere.
Here we are.
Yeah, that's right. Steve, this isn't the UN's only investigation of race relations in New Zealand. The UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture visited detention facilities to review conditions, noting the disproportionate representation of Māori in the justice system. And the UN Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples has also previously raised concerns about the government's approach to the Treaty of Waitangi. Shouldn't the need for this level of UN scrutiny towards how we treat Māori be a nationwide shame?
It is a nationwide shame. It is a nationwide shame. My dear colleague Tamatha Paul has just this week been highlighting the ridiculous increase in the prison population, the disproportionate number of Māori in prisons, and you know, I had a profound experience visiting the prison in Waikato with her and thinking, well, this is confiscated land, you know.
Wow.
You took the land off iwi Māori and then you built a prison and put them in it. It's kind of chilling. I get a shiver when I think about the pattern of that and that disenfranchisement of people, destruction of the economic base. You know, wife of Governor Gray visited the Waikato in the 1840s and said there was wheat fields and peach groves as far as the eye could see. And that was all Waikato Tainui agricultural production.
Yeah.
And Governor Gray said, I'll have that. I'll take that. Thank you very much. And that was the food basket for Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. That was all, and that's the history of our country. And then you wonder, the economic inequality stuff. But the race-relation stuff is an interesting one, picking up on Toe's point. There was a delegation of Indigenous people came recently, the month
That's right.
over.
Yep.
And previously in the Indigenous world, I speak as tangata tiriti, but I hear this from Indigenous people. New Zealand was regarded in that global community as a leader, as the model. Let's look to Aotearoa New Zealand and ask Te iwi Māori how they get, and now they come and they go, oh, what's gone wrong?
Yeah.
What's gone wrong? This government has done deep harm. And the thing I really want to say about it is no good can come of it. There's no good can come of sowing division. And the nastiness, the willingness of political power holders in this country to do that intentionally. David Seymour is not a stupid person. He knows what he's doing.
Yep.
And it's scurrilous. And you mentioned the Taxpayers Union. They should be called the Race Baiters Union.
Oh,
That's good.
Oh,
That's good.
oh, yes.
Because they line up with Hobson's Pledge and they play that nasty, divisive game. It is un-New Zealand because this is an imported cultural war principle. We are a nation founded on a peacetime treaty between the newcomers, my ancestors who wanted to settle here, and the tangata whenua Māori, and by consent, my ancestors sought the right to settle, based on a principle of upholding an agreement of recognising tino rangatiratanga of iwi Māori. That is the foundation of our nation. That is the cohesion of our nation. That is the only way forward. There is no way forward in sowing division. And that's why I truly hope that on that principle alone, a principle of national cohesion and unity, which means a respectful upholding of the promise of the agreement on which our country is constitutionally based, is the reason this government gets turfed out in 1 year's time.
Amen.
Because I do not believe
most
New Zealanders want that kind of division.
Can I just get a quick comment from you, Steve, while we're talking about your comrade Tamitha Paul? She received it was a pylon and a half at the earlier part of this year when she had the temerity to suggest that there were parts of our community who didn't trust the police and felt frightened by the police. In the wake of the McSkimming scandal and the disgraceful behaviour that was going on there, those voices aren't so quick to damn Tamitha now, are they?
I'll tell you about an amazing moment that happened at that time, is that in the House, there was a statement made by Mitchell as the Minister for Police, and there was an opportunity for a response. And I thought Labor, Ginny Anderson made a response. It was pretty good. Tam made the response for the Greens, and it was pin drop. And she asked questions of Mitchell, and he very humbly responded to Tamitha's questions. She is a very powerful leader of her people. Yeah. She is real. She's raised in Tokoroa. Her dad did prison time when she was a kid. She is the leader, Toe, that I think you're talking about, because she is the real deal. Yeah. And she has mana and she has gravitas. Yeah. And I felt so proud as a Green MP to sit beside her in that house on that day when she took it to Mitchell and said, what the hell's going on?
Preach.
So where's the inquiry? Oh, where's the inquiry?
Few bad apples,
a royal
few bad apples,
commission
few
of
bad
inquiry.
apples, few bad
but
apples.
bro, that's not the end of it.
Few bad apples.
Where's the inquiry into 30,000
falsified alcohol, breathalyzers.
Who's going to jail for that?
No one.
I should. If I did something like that, I'd be in the who's jail for 20 years.
That's right.
But that's the other.
I know.
And then there's the driver's license scam.
Yes.
Where's the inquiry? Who let this shit happen?
There is no depression in New Zealand. There's no corruption in New Zealand. We don't know how lucky we are. Comrades, we need to wrap up the show with a final word. To, your final word.
Oh, my final words is it's just to say to people, be strong. Be strong. It could be 6 months, it could be 12 months. Who knows? But here's the way to do it. If you want this government out, go grab 10 people. And those 10 people are going to vote for either Labour, the Māori Party or the Greens.
Yeah, those are three options.
And then those 10 people go get individually 10 people.
Yeah.
And it's the old story of that how a tree grows.
It's hard to do, but it's the right thing. It's the only thing.
But Obama pulled shit off like that.
Yeah.
He didn't have any money.
Yeah.
Give me 5 cents.
Yeah.
Give me 10 cents.
Yeah.
And when you ask 1 million people, that's $1 million.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not actually, but it's nearly.
It's more.
So I'm saying ka kaha tonu. Mo te whawhai I haere mai. The battle is coming, and we need to win it.
Preach. Steve, your final word this evening, please, sir.
Listen, take heart. I do not believe this is a popular government. And that gives me a great deal of hope. And I do believe that we can, to echo Toe's point, we can mobilise as a progressive population and turf them out and say we want something better, we want some true vision. And I think it must be based around a principle of unity and cohesion in our nationhood. Kia ora.
You're a great man. Have so much aroha for him. I really do. Simon, your final word.
Yeah, true to what both Toe and Steve have said. I think there's another casualty of the disastrous way in which the government is operating, and we haven't talked about that, and that's MMP. It gives such a bad name to MMP for things like that extraordinary, we just passed a ridiculous law and 2 of the 3 parties are going to vote against it next time, which is just so deeply cynical. Right. We need to have a better electoral system than that. We actually have it. It is called MMP, but MMP needs to be run in a better way. It ought not to be credible or possible for governments, for prime ministers to raise their heads up and say we're going to do it like this. It is despicable, absolutely despicable. And that is one of the other reasons why this lot need to be turfed out, because they have failed to uphold the basic tenets of how our democracy is supposed to work.
Preach. Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word, brothers and sisters. There are many things that manage to symbolise the venal corruption of this government. The bastardisation of the school lunches program into cheap slop, the IREX ferry fiasco, the gutting of public health by a smiling man-child, smashing Labour's infrastructure pipeline that created a cascade collapse across the entire economy, desperately needed public housing standing empty, 12 billion for military helicopters while kneecapping pay parity, the total capitulation to corporate interests via the Regulatory Standards Act, undermining workers' safety while the Pike River mine movie opened, the totally needless and counterproductive hate fest spawned by the Treaty Principles referendum, the war on climate legislation as New Zealand gets hit by more extreme weather, the cutting of benefits for people while giving the worst industries hundreds of millions in corporate welfare, refusing compensation to survivors of state abuse if they've gone to prison, refusing to recognise Palestine and siding with the war criminals, and the final example that manages to symbolise the venal corruption of this government is their entire response to the homelessness problem that they have created. Everyone in the homelessness sector told the government that their revised thresholds for emergency housing would create a tsunami of homelessness. Everyone in the homelessness sector said cutting $20 million from food banks would make those homeless more desperate. Everyone in the homelessness sector said cutting back on community outreach programs for the homeless would mean those homeless had no access to off-ramps via wraparound services. Despite everyone telling them this, National did it all anyway, resulting in an obscene spike in homelessness to the point that their poverty, addiction and mental health issues explode shamefully across our streets in a way that embarrasses us in front of the tourists. So embarrassed are they by the realities of their policy cruelty, they now put forward a solution to simply arrest the homeless. Firstly, shouldn't National ACT and New Zealand First voters be confronted with the grim reality of their social policies as they walk around? Secondly, shouldn't the government be heavily criticised for promoting criminalisation of the poverty they themselves have manufactured? Where does Chris Luxon, who is one of the richest politicians in New Zealand, who got an $8,000 rates reduction for his $1 million batch on Waiheke, and who has personally profited $600,000 from flipping property after he changed the rules, that Chris Luxon, where does he get off arresting the homelessness that he has created? Merry Christmas, everyone. This year, Santa has been mugged by winds and evicted by Kāinga. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News. After the show, the Bradbury Group enjoys conviviality at 165 Ponsonby Road. Why not pop down, meet the show staff and plot the revolution? That's 165 Ponsonby Road. Tuesday night drinking at its best. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small wetter in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.